Our topic is operational risk management this morning, and I'm looking for volunteers from, I understand there are 6 groups, and I'm looking for a volunteer from each group to do the heavy lifting, which we will do on the easels here. So please figure out who will be, for each group, your representative to tell us then and explain us how your risks are moving along. So that will be the purpose. It will be a very easy task, but we'll do a practical exercise here, so that's why we have the easels put up here. Okay, without further ado, I just want to go quickly through it. Risk management, is it a risky concept and overbought? I just did a picture from the screen, so the quality of this is very bad. It shows the Google word count in millions of documents, and it shows how the notion of risk is counted in millions of documents, and it goes up dramatically, 6-fold, 7-fold in the last 30 years. So it shows that also in the English language, risk is now within the top 10% as a noun of all the words used. I mean, it's a surprising result of the word count. And yet, even after this increase, we are still in the infancy of the meaningful use of the concept, not only in government, I have to tell you. Further advanced is the private sector than the government, in particular the financial sector, where risk management has always played a very big role. But I will revert back to that because it's not all that rosy, although the risk management is very refined and advanced. But as you know, in the financial crisis, it fell totally down. And that's why we got into the mess since 2008. So there's more to say, and I will come back to that for that reason. So back to the basics. Why is risk management an integral part of RBM? I think I mentioned a lot yesterday, so I will need only 4 slides here to argue that point again. Before I go there, just very quick overview. Only starting in 2005, risk management became an issue for the UN organizations. So it's very recent that you see that it was requested through different reports. We didn't need to go through the details here. But it's really only in the 2000s that the notion of risk management surfaced in the international organizations and the public sector in general. So what are results? We have discussed this yesterday, so I can build on everything we said. The rule of thumb is results materialize where others are making use of my organization's output. Now, I'm speaking specifically of outcomes and impact here. So that poses the problem. If others are using my outputs, I have by definition not full control over it. You know, I cannot control what is happening there. And that obviously raises the question, how can you be held then accountable? And you know, how can you be held accountable for your performance to achieve those results, which are really the whole rationale why you are there? And it seems that this is a conundrum. And I mentioned to you very shortly yesterday that organizations have been struggling with this conundrum. And because they didn't find a solution, they have stayed away from really engaging meaningfully and in an accountable way to take responsibility for the results they wanted to achieve. And I think this is posing a big problem for advancing with results-based management. It's right there. And it's one of the core problems. And unless you can find a solution to it, I can tell you, you will be stuck and not get beyond the outputs in the best case. So how do we resolve this? You know, authority and responsibility can be transferred, but accountability cannot be transferred. So we have to find a way to solve the accountability problem in RBM, and that my proposal is through operational risk management, ORM. So let's go back to this chart, which I use all the time as a reference. You are familiar with it now. You have the results chain up there. You have the budget systems lined up underneath. And here is where the elements of risk management come into play. These are marked in red here on this slide. So it is three things. It is the assumptions you are building ex ante when you are planning. These are your theories of change. When I do A, B, and C, I expect that D, E, and F is happening as the outcome. And then that is triggering the impact. So I must have a theory in my head. And this is where you, as the subject matter manager, have the best knowledge. You are the only ones who really can competently say, you know, this is the best assumption. You can ask others whether they know better, but this is why you are there as a manager, that you should know, you know, why you need to deliver an output A and not B in order to get here. So your assumptions is the first part. The second part is obviously that you need to deliver the outputs. Without your outputs, the results are not materializing. Cannot be. If they are materializing, they are not your doing. So you cannot take, you know, accountability for something which you haven't really generated. Now, that would be ludicrous. So obviously the delivery of your output is the second element. And the third one is the quality of your risk management. So why is that? The quality of the risk management is crucial because so many things happen here. What I call here, this step from here to here, I call it a quantum leap. There are a lot of external influences, other things are happening which are not under your control. And so as you go towards implementation, a lot of things may change. And as they change, you have to obviously align and adapt your plans. And that is what risk management is doing. Risk management, in other words, is a continuous scanning of your operational environment in order to see whether things have changed to a point that you need to adapt and change your plans. And then obviously, if that is the case, you have to change your plans and have to explain why you have to change your plans. It may be that you cannot continue the program, then stop it. But don't continue when it has no chance of success. That is a bad risk management. So in other words, what I'm saying is a very simple thing based on this whole thing, that accountability in RBM is achieved through this triangulation. It sounds more complicated than it actually is. The triangulation for accountability of your outputs, that's what you need to deliver. Accountability for the validity of your assumptions in the planning stage, that you are competent and know what you are looking for and have a theory of change, which you can explain to others why you are doing this. And third, accountability for your risk management process. In other words, for the quality of your risk management. So it's not rocket science. It looks a little bit complicated. I was inspired when I developed those thoughts by, you know, modern physics and chemistry, where you look at very small things and you cannot see them directly. So you look through a grid of, say, some structure, because only through that grid you can indirectly assume, you know, how big or small a thing you want to observe might be, because it fits within the structure, but you can never see it directly. And it's a little bit like this here. The outcomes are beyond your direct visibility, but there are these three things which you can control, and if you do this successfully, the outcomes will materialize. If they don't materialize, something is wrong in this construct. And you have to ask yourself, where is it that something fell down? And I bet in most cases it is the quality of your risk management process, that you didn't adjust your plans while you were implementing. Let me give you another reference. As you know, the best risk management or the most advanced risk management is obviously in the banking sector and in finance. So, when the financial crisis occurred, what happened? People understood that the incentives were all set up wrong. Putting deals on your book in order to increase the bottom line was not the ultimate purpose, in particular if your organization, your bank, would not survive the next crisis. What would be the purpose to increase your profit in 1 year if 3 years down the road the whole bank is down the drains? So understanding that wrong incentive structure, what has happened in almost all banks, the incentive structure was changed. And the bankers are not so much judged anymore on what they put on the bottom line, which is in banking probably the results they want to achieve, but they're judged now and evaluated on the quality of their risk management. Goldman Sachs says, we judge you not so much on how many $1 billion you added to our bottom line, but on the quality of your risk management to see whether what you have added is actually sustainable. And we see that often a couple of years down the road. So that's very similar to what you find in many private sector areas where risk management is more advanced. So that's basically all, and we can stop it here. That's all I want to have to say. And it's so simple, yet it resolves a big conundrum, namely accountability in RBM. I really don't want to make it appear anything more complicated than that. Now, what I want to do is, obviously, I want to do a little exercise with, what is it now, what we define as risk, and how do we assess them. These are just the practical implications of risk management. So, risk analysis first. The process of risk analysis, I just want to present you the OECD DAC definition, which is comprising these three elements, namely, first, the assessment of the assumptions. We have seen that. It's a very important element. Second, risk analysis comprises, an examination of the potential unwanted and negative consequences to human life, health, property, or the environment. And third, it's a systematic process to provide information for quantification of the probabilities and expected impact. So I just wanted to give you a little bit through this information a sense of the elements of risk analysis. Now let's go quickly, directly into this. Risk is defined. Here we have a definition. Exposure to the possibility of loss, injury, or other adverse or unwelcome circumstance. A chance or situation involving such a possibility. That comes from the Oxford English Dictionary. And you're all familiar with it. This is probably most closely to the common notion of when we talk, oh, this is risky or that's risky. Now, please take a piece of paper, and we start now some exercises. And write down, please, in the first exercise, the two operational risks, without defining this now further, just write down what you think the two operational risks which you consider the most relevant in your organization or your area of work. We just take 2 minutes for that, not more, because this should not be complicated. Can we have some examples? Can you give us the two you have written down, noted? Anybody? Who volunteers? Yeah? Two risks in your area of work. Or, yeah? Not delivering, I repeat, not delivering the services supposed to deliver, yeah?
Not performing as per the set standards, say the timelines, or either delay or bypass. One is in the quality sense, another is in the quantity sense. Not delivering means quantitatively you are not doing, and qualitatively you are not doing it in the time frame or in the parameters you are required to do.
Not adhering to the quality standards, whatever they are defined. Okay.
So in my case, first risk is delay in getting budget. Delay in getting budget. Though we have our plans and everything intact, but what happens whatever time we actually think that by this time budget will be made available, sometimes that is not made available by that
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
The first risk is delay in getting budget, and
Yeah.
second risk is
So a budget gap you see as a potential risk.
delay in getting budget, sir. Time frame, suppose that it might be made available to me till June, but it comes
Right.
somewhere in October.
Yeah. Okay.
And second is non-availability of budget at all for that purpose. Suppose
Yeah.
that what happens, government, we have so many plans, so many budgetary
Yeah.
outlays,
Right.
but end of the day government thinks that priorities are changed in other departments and budget are not given at all for that purpose. So even though we have planned everything, and due to non-availability of first delay, second non-availability at all.
Now, would you know that or not? Does it come
No,
as
no,
a
no, no,
surprise?
sir. No, it's the second one we do not know, that we are not going to get it at all. First, we can expect that.
So
yes,
let me just be clear. You are told you're not getting a budget. You are planning something without having a budget.
No,
Is
sir.
that a risk?
No, no, sir. I am simply saying that first we have prepared our budget, everything was assured to us, and the budgetary outlay which was expected in June was sometime not given in June, it was given in October. This is the first risk, that whatever I am expecting
Yeah.
in June, it is getting in October. The second, for some of our programs, in India what happens, estimates are revised in the budget. What happens in case government priority gets changed and any particular department wants more budget, for some of our programs, our budgetary outlays are actually diverted to other departments. So our second risk is, sir, first is getting the budget in late, and second risk, we also said that at the last time, the budget for our program can be diverted for any other program.
So a budget shortfall is what you see as a risk.
Communication gap is one of the operational risks, like augmentation of my marketing plan with the production plan. It sometimes doesn't happen. Then failure in meeting the commitment in time due to some external or internal factors.
So you cannot, well, for your risk assessment, you would need to identify what these external factors or internal factors are which prevent you from meeting your commitments.
That is identified.
Yeah.
We had been regularly working on that.
But you need, the risk identification is precisely what you need to do, is to be precise on what these factors are. Otherwise, you cannot act on them.
Like change in government policies.
Yeah.
That is one of the external factors.
For example, yeah.
Which prevent us
that
from
could be
meeting
a
our
risk.
commitment.
Right. That could be a risk. Changing government policies,
Yes.
as here our colleague has said from the IS, that budget may be diverted.
Right.
It was allocated to your department, but now it is diverted to some other place. So suddenly you have an unexpected shortfall here. Yeah?
Right.
So that is a risk. I don't know how likely it is to happen, but it's obvious that it happens. So very good. Yeah.
Lack of monitoring and evaluation during the management, and also external lack of coordination and cooperation between some organization and duplication.
Let me understand. Lack of monitoring and evaluation.
Evaluation during the management process.
What risk is that constituting? What is the risk?
And guidance to staff during the process of management. I think it's risk internally. In lack of coordination and cooperation between different sites for and duplication the process.
That can definitely be a risk. Okay. So I think this gives you a first sense a little bit of what we are talking of in terms of this definition: possibility of loss, injury, or other adverse or unwelcome circumstance. Yeah? Now this is, if you want, a traditional common sense definition which we all use when we talk of risks. The more modern definition is this one. Risk is defined as the uncertainty of outcome, positive opportunity or negative threat. You see, the first one was all geared towards the negative event. Now this is, if you want, a more symmetrical definition. It has an upside as well as a downside. And the essential part of the definition here is the uncertainty of the outcome. Actually, in the financial markets and stock markets, that is largely overlapping with a notion you may be more familiar with, and that is volatility. Volatility is a measure in stock markets for uncertainty. So you have to switch your thinking now from just the adverse event to the uncertain event. And that brings us obviously more into line with RBM theories. Yeah? So our second exercise now is think of this definition. You use this definition now, the second one, uncertainty of outcome, and convert your first one of your two risks you have written down. Convert them from a threat into an opportunity. If you have properly identified the risk, which is not the non-delivery, that is the event, the impact, if you want. The risk must be something else which is triggering this non-delivery. If you can identify properly your risk, now convert it from the negative impact in your first exercise into an opportunity as a second step. At least one of your two risks. And then in a minute give us some examples of what it looked like and how you have converted it. I'm curious how you're doing. Yeah?
Sir, I am representing a development financing institution, and we are engaged in financing the cooperative sector. So the major risk what we face is resources mobilization at a cheap cost, at a, I should not say cheap, it should be optimum cost, and put it to the cooperative sector at a reasonable price.
I don't think that is your risk, really.
Because we are bringing it from the, we are resourcing it from the market.
Yeah.
So market rates go
Yeah.
up and down. That is my risk portion.
So
And
let's be clear.
Yeah, yeah.
You want to provide funding at the lowest cost to the cooperative sector.
Yeah.
What is specifically the risk? That you are targeting a certain cost level and you may not achieve that? Or what is the risk?
Sir, target group represents the small farmers
Right.
and rural artisans. So they are poor people. They cannot afford to have finance at a higher cost.
Yeah.
Cooperatives give them the opportunity to develop themselves by aggregation, by the
Yeah.
strength of
No,
their unity. So that is one part. And the other part of my story is that I have mobilized resources, but if I don't get enough number of good proposals which are techno-economically viable. So this is another part of my risk.
Yeah, I'm still wondering,
Yeah.
how you can define your risk. Let me give you the equivalent example. I want to fight poverty as the World Bank, but I reach only half of mankind, or a quarter. That is not my risk. My risk is that the quarter I can reach and for which I make a plan, that is the boundary of what I can do. I have a plan for the quarter and I cannot deliver that plan because of this or that event. So I think we need to be very clear in specifying what is the risk. The risk is not that you don't reach the whole cooperative sector. You reach only a segment of that.
We reach a segment of it.
Yeah, okay, so that is not the risk.
There are other players also in the market.
Yeah.
They also try to provide. So our problem is that we do not get the resources from the government of India at a reasonable cost. So we have to raise it from the market. That is my part of the problem.
Okay.
And if it goes up, the market rate goes up, then it becomes very difficult for me to source the resources and then mobilize, then put it to the sector. And the sector also is not strong enough to generate enough number of
Yeah.
good proposals.
Right.
That is my another part of the.
But I think you need to
Risk.
be even clearer on articulating the operational risk you are facing.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
There's a competition.
Yeah.
And what is the operation? The competition as such is not his risk. Yeah.
No, we are doing. It is not that we are not doing. We are doing it in the corporation since
Yeah.
its inception 50 years back. It is continuously in profits. So we
Well-
are somehow managing.
Right.
So what I was thinking about the strategy to this thing, meet the challenges.
Bear with me for a moment because we will do a little exercise to do more of that to be clearer. Let's, if you can just hold until we come to that exercise, yeah. I mean, I think let's just stay with this exercise here. Have you transformed at least one of your operational risks into an opportunity?
In my organization, one of the areas is the training of our own officers to make them capable of giving some delivery of the services.
Yes.
Now, training of the officers is one of the output. My training institute gives that. Now, the risk is that the officers who come for training, we do not know how the training goes inside them, how far they are able to take the training seriously, use them for the delivery of services.
Mm-hmm.
So the risk is this gap. We think that we are giving them enough training, but when they go back, how much they are able to use that, now there is a gap.
So let me try to understand. The risk you're articulating is that you deliver training, but it doesn't achieve its purpose because the people don't use it.
Yes. Maybe
Okay.
they are not motivated, maybe they are not
Yeah.
serious about the training program.
Right.
Maybe something.
They have other motivations. They come to have a good lunch or whatever and
They take a
don't
vacation.
absorb really the training. Okay. And now convert that into the opportunity.
Now, we want to, we want to develop a program to assess the training level.
Yeah.
How far the training has been able to enhance their capability.
Yes,
We
that's
want
what
to
you should
develop
do.
a program.
To see how effective your training
Yes,
was.
and whether it leads to further improvement in their performance
Yes,
at
yeah.
their work level.
Right. And is that your opportunity?
Yeah, this is the opportunity for us to develop a program to build a higher capacity.
Not quite. You basically do the right thing. You try to manage that, through a feedback to see how effective the training is, but you still have not converted the risk. We are talking of something different here in terms of the conversion of the risk.
Yes.
I mean, it's a good example for the first case. You have an adverse risk, the training is not absorbed, and then you try to manage it better. Let's see whether we find a good transformation. Yeah.
If I consider risk as a failure to provide required resource as planned,
Yes.
resources
What
can
is the risk?
my failure.
A short gap, a gap
Yes,
in
a
resource
gap.
availability.
Yes, resource availability.
And the gap is unexpected.
The gap is unexpected.
Okay, good.
And I converted it into an opportunity because this gives me a chance to review all my resource requirement, not only the particular resource which I failed to provide, but also the other resources which are needed to execute the plan
Brilliant.
as planned.
Brilliant. And to become more efficient through that.
Yes, yes.
Brilliant. Yeah. So you go to a wider horizon. Wonderful example. Do we have any other?
I'll
We
just
have
revert the earlier one. There is a lack of monitoring. So that is the risk because the true picture will not come. And the opportunity is that I create maybe a robust IT-based system or a system where the monitoring is much more robust.
We had another example there. Excellent. Yeah.
My
Thank you.
example is the following.
Yeah.
The risk in failure of the prevention of meningitis epidemic
Yeah.
in a given country 1 year.
What is the risk?
The risk in failure of prevention, on well prevention, the epidemic of meningitis
Yeah, you described the event, and how did that come about to that, you know, the failure occurred? What was the factor which caused that?
The failure could be the failure of having, you know, a good preparedness plan, the failure of having a chain of...
Well, let me just say, the failure to have a good plan
yeah,
is not a risk, because you know that you don't have a plan.
yeah, but we have...
Right? I mean, the risk is something unexpected, you know, an adverse event which happens unexpectedly. If you don't have a plan, that is not an unexpected event. You just don't have a plan.
not having a plan, but a good plan.
Also, that is not unexpected. So let's say you have a plan,
Yeah,
whether it's a good plan or a bad plan.
yeah,
Let's assume it's a mediocre plan.
yeah,
So you will, according to this plan, only achieve so much. Now, a risk is occurring which prevents you to achieve with your mediocre plan only so much. So you achieve even less than that.
yeah.
But what is that risk which is intervening why your plan is not being translated? Yeah?
Yeah,
So that's the first thing you need to identify. And then you can go on and think about how to transform that into an opportunity.
great.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
We actually have a program, we adopted the RBM program in 2006 in Zimbabwe. And we trained a core group,
Yeah.
like training of trainers.
Right?
The risk we faced was that the 40 trainers were eventually going to leave government. And most of them did, eventually. And we then turning that into an opportunity was that when they left going into private sector.
Right.
Right?
Right.
As an opportunity, they would still be engaged as trainers, bring in from private sector their experiences
Right.
into government and continue training.
Okay, that's a wonderful example. So you train the trainer. The risk is that you cannot know who is going to leave out of that group. And so therefore, your risk is that you are confronted with a shortfall of trained trainers, which has a big impact on the delivery of your program. And you convert that into an opportunity to bring them back from the private sector where they have gone with even more experience and more expertise. And so instead of bringing down your program, you actually can improve it. I think we need to do a little bit more. Let's see how we are going to do this. The risk identification obviously is a little bit difficult. Let's consider you are a financial controller and you have to look at a limited value at risk, what you can risk as the controller. And you have two cases, two investment alternatives. One is an innovation. Small amount of money, $100,000, the risk probability is very high. That is always the case with innovations. Let's say 80%. This is just fictive. The second one is you take over another organization, a huge amount of investment needed, 100 million. The risk probability that this fails is very small at 1%. So what would you authorize as controller, as financial controller in your organization? Which of these and on what basis would you authorize it? Who is walking us through this? You would what? Need more detail? Sure.
Yes, I think this would require some more details.
Yes.
The rate of return, the duration.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
I think the data shown there is quite less, and 80% probability
Absolutely
for risk.
right.
What about return? The greater the risk,
Yes.
the greater the return is in finance.
Yeah. You are thinking absolutely correctly that you need to specify the benefits. But let's say as a financial controller, you are asked how much money can you put at risk of your assets? And that's the only question you have to judge on. Which one would you authorize? We are talking now only as the value of your assets you put on risk. Nothing else. It's the most fundamental, simple question for a financial controller. I have assets of an amount of X. how much of these assets can I put to risk, irrespective of what the benefits are, etc. I just want to know how much of my assets, my financial assets, do I put at risk. Which one would you authorize?
I would authorize the first one, where
And on what basis?
it's a relatively smaller amount, 100,000.
Yeah, with a high risk failure probability.
Yes, but the return could also be very high
Yeah,
if it goes well.
So obviously, you look value at risk as a probability of the money or the assets you put at risk, which is the product of the two. So always you multiply the impact or the investment with the probability, and then you can see in one case here, you're right, the innovation is implying such a small amount of your assets that irrespective of the high failure probability, this is what you can authorize if you have a limited budget which you can put at risk. The other one, although the probability to fail is so small, it's just requiring a huge amount, even with 1% at risk, it's a huge amount of money you put at risk, namely 1 million. And if you don't have that, you shouldn't do it, irrespective how small the risk is. Yeah? So just to show you, risk is always a product of exposure, the magnitude or impact here, in this case the investment amount, times the probability of its occurrence. And don't be fooled by, a small or high probability. What counts is the product of the two. Now, we have had a little bit the discussion, what is the cause, what is the risk, and what is the impact. So I have put here, because I expected that there would be some confusion in understanding what a risk is, I have put here 5 examples together. Let's quickly go through that. And the first one is what you said. Our budget envelope has been cut as basis for drawing up our next annual program, as if I had expected that to happen in the India government as well as in others. Okay. Irrespective of the higher demand for our services, our organization cannot even deliver at the same level as last year. What is the cause here in this case? The shortfall in budget. What is the risk? The risk is what? Not delivery? Let's go to the impact and we come back to the risk. What is the impact? We cannot deliver. We cannot deliver even to the same level as last year. So far, so clear. Where is the risk? None, because the budget cut was known to you. The risk is a totally different one, because the budget cut is known, and you cannot deliver is known as well, or you can deliver less. So what is the risk? The risk would really be that you are unable to align your program to the budget envelope you have been provided. Yeah? Or to make the appropriate trade-offs in order to accommodate your program with the budget which was given to you. So no risk involved here. I mean, in this sense of the example. If the budget cut was not known, as you were saying, you were given a budget, and then the budget was reallocated to another department, that's a real risk. For that, you have to draw up a risk mitigation plan, if that happens. And if that happens regularly, you can plan for it with a risk mitigation strategy. Then you have a real risk. I'm just saying our budget envelope has been cut as the basis already for drawing up our plan. So in this description, it is clear that the budget cut was happening before you drew up your plans. So it was known to you. Yeah? So that's why I put it that way. So in that case, there is no risk. Now the next case, our plan states a team of 10 is needed, 10 staff for program X. But as we start up, we have only 6 staff available. So we are unlikely to complete the work on time. Okay, what is the risk? Shortfall of staff is the cause. You're right. What is the risk? Incomplete service delivery, and the impact is, time delay. Yeah. Too small the team for the required scope of the program. So that is a true risk. So you have planned for a program with 10 staff, and it happens that you have only 6 because something else has occurred. Yeah? The next one, our team has introduced a new software. unexpected errors may occur which lead to overspending. What is the cause? New software is the cause. Introduction of new software. What is the risk? Yes, possibility of errors, and the impact is overspending. We have to outsource production. We may be able to learn from our new partner, leading to increased productivity. Outsourcing case. What is the cause? The outsourcing. What is the risk? The risk is here the learning from our partners. Now, that is an opportunity. Now, in this case, we have a very clear case where a risk is articulated as an opportunity. We may be able to learn from our partner. So it's a wonderful description of an opportunity according to the second definition. It is uncertain because we may be able, it's not certain that we will be able to learn from our partners. Yeah? And then increased productivity would be the impact. Being held up in traffic, I miss my next very important meeting. So what is the cause? Being held, traffic jam, you say, is the cause? The risk? I don't know. I think the traffic jam is, you can preempt because you know every morning when you go to your work you have this traffic jam. The risk is probably that you may have left too late, which is not a risk, which is just your action. So I think neither cause nor a risk is clear in that. Missing the meeting is the only clear impact. You know? So just to be clear a little bit on the distinction between cause, risk, and impact, you have to be very clear in articulating your risk, you know, that you really pick the right thing here. You know, if you say the risk would be, in this example 3 here, the introduction of new software, if you articulate that as a risk, you cannot capture the true risk anymore. So you have to be very clear what the risks are with this little example to illustrate. Okay.
All the negative traits cannot be made as a positive opportunity. It is possible.
No, not all risks can be converted in opportunities. But many can, and it is worthwhile to think through which of the risks which you are facing can be converted into opportunity. And if they can, always address them in that form, you know, because it provides you more opportunities. So identify, prioritize, and act on your risk identification, then risk assessment and risk response.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, in the example which I gave, regarding training part,
yeah.
that how will you convert their risk into the opportunity?
Well, we have heard another example, which was a very interesting one, you know, where the training of the trainers was facing the risk that people unexpectedly, because you never know in advance, were leaving out of that pool of trained trainers. So you are faced with a shortfall of trained people in your pool.
So, but my case is a little different, sir.
Yeah, sure it is. But I just describe you, every case is different. This was just a good description then to bring the people back from the private sector, although they are no longer in the public sector, you know, is an opportunity not only to complete or replenish your pool, but also to add additional skills from the private sector in that pool. So this is a wonderful description of a risk which has been converted, in this case, into an opportunity. So we have to look into that, and we can discuss probably later in detail how to do that in your case, yeah? So you start with risk identification to get an overview of all operational risks pertaining to your mandate, and through aggregation then obviously the risks the organization is facing. Risk identification can be performed by a designated team, a process of self-assessment, including questionnaires, facilitated workshops, and other tools. I give you an overview of the most common techniques used for risk identification. And if risk identification is undertaken internally, different risk perceptions, which are typically between different departments in your organization, need to be addressed so that you are not having one department which is very negative in its perception of risk and another one very positive. The guiding principles for identification of operational risks are these 5: objectivity, consistency, relevance, organization-wide, they need to be able to be aggregatable, and transparency and completeness. That means all material risks should be identified and reported. I think this is pretty self-evident, but it's useful to look at that list of 5 guiding principles. Now, risks are usually classified in different classes, and I just want to be clear with you what we are talking about. This is a private sector example. So you have strategic risks, relating to all these issues. You have the operational risks, and you have the financial risks, and then sometimes it's distinguished between external and internal risks. There are many different representations of different risk classes. What I'm saying here, we are looking at operational risk, and they often comprise strategic risk, and I'll show you how. Is the operational risk management absolute or position dependent? Let's see. Operational risk management falls within the scope of an agent's mandate or authority. That means if you are doing the operational risk assessment for your area of work, then you have to list all the operational risks which fall into the scope of your mandate, of your authority. And that means it is obviously position dependent. If you are the boss and you do your operational risk assessment, then it would include all the strategic risks which pertain to the organization as well. If you are let's look at this example. It makes it very clear. If you're in the middle management, then decisions translating the strategy into action belong to your operational risk. If you are managing a project, then obviously all the risks relating to that project are part of your operational risk management. So basically saying, in some cases, and it depends on which position you are in, it may include to different extents also strategic risks. Okay, here is another classification from the IFC, which is the private sector arm of the World Bank. And you can see here operational risk, which is what we focus on, and strategic risks is basically what we look most at in our case now for RBM. Operational risk in RBM depends on the position of the risk owner and can also comprise strategic risks. Okay, then, the distinction internal, external risk, I don't think there is anything more to say about that, and then there is an overlap in the relationships and partnerships. I don't go into this in much detail. Techniques to identify uncertainties or risks. They reach from the usual questionnaires, from interviews one-on-one to audit findings, structured discussion, brainstorming in a team, questionnaires to critical path analysis, and what is used very often and has become very prominent is scenario planning to explore alternative and understand the risks in those alternatives. Now, this is a very onerous and time-consuming exercise to do it properly. So you would not do it on a regular basis. You would do it occasionally, say every couple of years, to review your risk setting. But those are some of the techniques. Now let's go to our next exercise. Which one do you consider the most important risk in each of the following risk classes? A reputational risk, a financial risk, strategic risk, and operational risk. Just write it down, the 4. And we take not more than a minute, otherwise we're running out of time. But just for you to be clear, try to articulate in your area what are the 4 most important risks in each of these risk classes so that you have some clarity how you understand the different risk classifications. And we'll work with that then in the next exercise. So you have put down here 4 risks. We go now to the risk assessment. This is basically the sections of my presentation are representing the normal cycle you would go through in your risk management procedure. So there's nothing of a rocket science. It's just a logical sequence how you go through an assessment of your risk. Now we are at risk assessment and prioritization. Basically what you need to do is you need to articulate a risk assessment scale. And what I suggest for our exercise, what we'll do here now, let's just for the simplicity of it, you can adopt any risk assessment scale. That depends on the organization. Whether it's low, medium, high, or whether it's 1 to 3 or 1 to 10, it's up to you to decide. The organization has to make a decision. I would just say for simplicity here, let's adopt a scale 1 to 10, both for impact and for likelihood of occurrence or probability. And now let's put the 4 risks which you have put on the paper right now in the 4 classes of risks. Let's assess them with this scale. So put your judgment on each of the 4 in this format. What is the impact of that on a scale from 1 to 10, or 0 to 10, 10 maximum, 1 minimum? What is the probability, what is the likelihood, and then the multiplication of the 2 would give you the risk rating. And now what we would like to see quickly is someone for each table to put their example on the easel in sort of this matrix here. You have 1 to 10 on both axes, and you have this square, and put it down there what your risks are, and mark it with 1 to 4. So where are our volunteers? Okay, let's show you. What you need to do is obviously then, I don't need to go in detail. You need to describe the risk very clearly so that if you are moved to another department, or if a bus is running over you, you're in a hospital, somebody else is doing your risk assessment, then they can understand what you have assessed and how you have assessed it. So you need to be very clear on the description of this. So then we obviously have a matrix, a risk matrix with 4 segments here. And that's what you get here in when you put it on the matrix. Yeah? 1 to 10, say, is our assessment scale. And then you have, obviously, the different quadrants. Green is of low importance. And obviously, the different colors have a meaning to it, which you are probably familiar. Medium low importance or medium high importance, are those, and high importance, the red ones, are mission critical from your perspective as a risk owner of operational risks. So put your risks into this matrix. So everybody would have this matrix in front of them, and you have 4 points there, right, which represent the risk assessment scores. Is that clear? Okay? Now, where are you ending? Who has all risks in the green area? What do you think in the green area? Nobody. Who has all risks in the red area? Anybody? Who has all risks in the yellow area? Nobody has any risks, it seems. So what happens? Where are you?
No risk.
Huh? Is it too fast? Yeah? Are we advancing too fast? No.
Sir, less time giving in workshop is also a risk, sir.
Well, I didn't judge the risks properly here, probably, in going through this exercise with you, trying to do it very quickly. So who has, in the assessment, 1 to 10 for the impact, 1 to 10 for the probability? You multiply the 2. Who has there identify a risk where you think it would fall into the red zone? Hand up. 1 risk in the red zone. I hope to find 1 risk in the red zone. 1 red risk, no? Yeah? Yes? You have? What is that? Describe.
The employee not doing the monitoring,
They don't monitor?
They don't get into that monitoring format.
Okay. So the monitoring falls down. you don't get the monitoring report you're looking for because what? What happens?
Cooperative, or they're not getting into the system.
What is the risk why you don't get the monitoring?
Unreliability of the employees'
So
behavior.
it's a people risk.
Yes.
A people risk which you think is very high. And so what is your risk assessment score?
The likelihood as 10 and impact as 10.
Impact 10, likelihood 10, 100, it cannot be more. It's definitely in the red. No question about it. If that were your situation, poor you. Because basically it's almost a certainty that you will not get your monitoring reports
Likelihood
properly.
5, impact 10. It's 50, yeah.
It's 50?
So, little higher.
100 is almost certainty. 50, let me ask you, do you consider 50 in the red zone as medium high? Well, that is intuitively. You see, what I'm saying now is you need to define the delineation of these zones very clearly. And how would the zones be delimited if you were drawing it into this chart? They would be drawn here with some so-called ISO risk curves that are curves which have the same risk rating along the curve. And anything above that would be, say, red, below that yellow, and then another curve below that would be green. We go to that. Quickly, your answer. Where are black swan events located in this matrix? Where are they? Yellow. Why? But I want to know where they are. In which quadrant? Where low probability and very high impact. So they are on the very upside here, in this quadrant here. They're here. Very high impact, very low probability. That is what characterizes black swan events, yeah? Okay, now, defining the boundaries of the risk matrix, you have to be very clear in how you define the boundaries. Please note the different notions here. The likelihood is here described as remote, as possible or probable. And you need to put these definitions to it to be clear that everybody can understand where the boundary is, and the impact is either negligible, moderate, or significant. And again, you would have to describe for your organization what that means. It's unlikely that you can put a dollar value to this. I mean, business are doing that. It's unlikely that in the public sector you can do it. It's not needed, really. But it's just illustrative here to show you how these boundaries are defined. The meaning of the color coding has a very clear meaning to it. Green means the programs are on track and should broadly achieve their desired outcome. Now, be very clear on this. This is great. If you have green risks only, means you will achieve, you're saying to your boss, I am confident that I will achieve the program targets I have put in my plan. Now, if you don't achieve them, better explain them why your risk management didn't show up that you wouldn't achieve them. Yellow means the programs need to come under close observation, but the line manager is confident that he or she will be able to bring it back on track through adequate risk mitigation measures. So that means you can mitigate the risk. Red means programs are off track, you are unable to identify satisfactory mitigating actions, and therefore you have to escalate them to the next higher level to find a resolution to the risk. Don't sit on red risks in your portfolio. If you have red risks and you don't act, this is very poor performance. And you should be judged, as manager, you should be judged on the quality of your risk management actions. You have a question?
There are 4 risks. The risks are reputational risk, strategic risk, financial risk, and operational risk.
Yeah.
So I find out the risk, through the risk assessment, identification, and the rating process, I found out the risk assessment. I quantify the risk in terms of numbers, 100 and yeah. And then all the 4s I am taking together.
Yeah.
Achha, then I come to the color coding. Finally, I come to the color coding. It might indicate green or yellow or red.
Right.
Now, it might so happen that one of the, because I'm aggregating, one of the risk is on a red, but in the aggregation gives me green.
Yeah, don't aggregate. There's no need to aggregate those into one.
Okay, I don't.
You identify the individual risk and you act on that.
Okay.
The question is, to what does an individual risk relate to? And I would argue in RBM, you relate your operational risks, to each of your success indicator, which indicates an outcome or an impact. Yeah? Not the outputs necessarily, because they are still under your control. But every success indicator which aims to achieve an outcome should have a risk assessment with it, because of the theory I presented to you. Yeah? Okay? And don't aggregate those. I mean, aggregation means only you list them in this matrix as the separate points. Let's just assume your scoring would end up in this matrix. 1 is here, 1 is here.